Good morning. Happy Tuesday. This is Danielle Daniel. I'm doing a Brain Talk Tuesday live on Facebook. So if you're watching this video on my YouTube or recorded or on my website, that's great. Hello. And please, as you join, whether watching the recorded or live, comment below and say hi to me. Tell me where you're joining from. And also I want to ask, as you guys watch this video, to type in those things that really stick out to you, that maybe are little like nuggets of knowledge that you learned today. It always helps me to see what kind of content people are wanting and needing and where they're ready to learn. So that'll help as I talk about brain science to put it into terms that is easily understandable for everybody. So again, Danielle Daniel here. I am a licensed clinical social worker and Doctor of Clinical Psychology student. And today I'm sharing with you my final course or my final research paper from my course on addictions. So I just finished my course last week and actually on Saturday and turned in my research paper, got an A in the class, so super happy about that. And it was very fascinating to dive into more of the neuro aspect of what happens with addictions and then the treatment and the help and all those things that come when all these other parts like the brain and neurotransmitters as well as family, there's so many aspects that addictions affect in our life. So we're going to go and dive into that. So hello, great to have you guys join. So I also would like to ask if we can have somebody, so I asked if you can do comments on those little knowledge pieces that like inspire you or that you like or that, maybe stuck out to you. And then also if someone could be a scribe, because I am going to go into some brain pieces, and I always like when someone can type in, if you're on a computer, it might be easier, some of the main points and some of the information that I give you, because that helps us to learn. And it's a really good way to just kind of keep us on focus and on track. So, all right, well, I'm going to get started. So first off, those of you who know, I do Brain Talks every single Tuesday. And I love to bring you stuff that I researched in my doctorate and just stuff that is applicable that you can improve for your life and create mental health awareness. All of us, our entire life is dependent upon our mental health, and the quality of this thing right here and our thinking really determines the quality of our entire life. So that's what we are going to dive into. Every single Tuesday we dive into, but today we're going to dive into how addictions affect. And if you have some people maybe you can think of that this might help or shed some light for them, please share this on your timeline or in Facebook, or you can also tag them in the comments below. So great to have you guys on. I'm going to get started right into addiction. So first off, how many of you guys know somebody who has an addiction? This is very common. I can think of several people. And so it's a very common thing. And the hard part sometimes with people who have addictions, they don't realize they have addiction. I know for some people, they just think, oh, well, it's just a little bit. It's not a big deal, and it's pretty much every single day. And so it is actually a big deal, and you can see how it affects their lives. So as you are watching this, maybe give us some examples of how you see it in the comments below. How do you see it affecting their life that maybe they're unaware of? Because I know for me, when I'm learning content, you're just like, okay, I'm learning. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get it. And your mind's open up at a whole nother level. So I know with addictions, the same thing. You don't really understand what's happening to you. And there's actually some physical and neurological changes, neurochemical changes that happen in the brain with addictions. So we know it's affecting. Okay, so let's just go into what happens with addictions. First of all, there's quite a few neurotransmitters that are involved. The main neurotransmitter that they've identified across the board with addictions, whether it be gambling, smoking, drugs, alcohol, pornography, obesity as well, like a food addiction, it's dopamine. So we have in the center of our brain called the nucleus accumbens, and this is like your pleasure center of the brain, where when you see a beautiful sunset, you just get this little amount of dopamine that's released, and you're like, oh, it's so pleasurable to look at. Or like if you eat something, really tasty, and you're like, oh, that's so good. So that's just a little bit of dopamine. Thank you, Mia, for typing in. I see in the comments. So that's your dopamine that fires at normal amounts. And what happens is we have inside of the nucleus accumbens, we have dendrites. Okay, so let's just pretend my fingers, I'm going to make this simple. My fingers are dendrites. Okay, these dendrites, when you get like the surge of just pleasure and just feelings just at peace and love and a pleasurable experience in life, you get a little bit of dopamine that gets released, and the dopamine connects to those dendrites. Okay, the dendrites are connecting them, and just feels great, and it's normal. The brain does that as yes, and caffeine is addictive. I saw Frank just said that. So that is what happens. It just releases this pleasure, and you're like, that's so nice, In a normal amount, it's actually good. It's healthy, and you want it. It really drives us to seek like gratitude and pleasure in things that can refabricate that. But there's a way that this system gets abused. And what happens is dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Well, it can be both, but in this sense, it's an excitatory. And so what that means is it excites. And just like it says, right? Not that much of brain science there. So when you have an addiction, what happens is when you introduce a drug or alcohol or gambling or something that causes a major surge, just overstimulation to the brain, you get a massive surge of dopamine to these dendrites, right? Obviously I've got 5 fingers here, so 5 dendrites, let's say. It's not really 5. And it gets released in your brain. There's so much dopamine, it just can't handle it. And it creates this like, woo, euphoric type response. And so much dopamine, it is very exciting. But what happens is then your dendrites are just like, first it depletes you of dopamine. Your whole body's just like, boom, depleted of dopamine. And then these dendrites are so overwhelmed that it triggers to the body, hey, we need more dendrites. So then it starts to create more, and you're depleted of dopamine. So do you see the cycle? You're depleted of dopamine, you have more dendrites, and your body's like, I need more. It starts craving, and that's where that withdrawal and that craving comes in. I need to do it again. Okay, so this is one part of the neurochemical changes that happen in addictions. So then, as you do the addiction, it fires dopamine, and in order to sustain an excitable desire with whatever addiction it is, you need more, and you need more, and you build up a tolerance because your brain keeps producing more dendrites and more, and then you get less dopamine. So it becomes very, very vicious. So that's how those cycles. So sometimes if we say to people, well, just stop, it's like you can see why it would be hard. Is it necessary to just do abstinence? Yes, but is it easy? No. They've got a major neurochemical thing going on. So the second part of that, I'm going to grab my notes here, make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay. The second, yep, I said everything right. Second part of this is because of all the neurochemicals that fire and all the other, things it does in the brain, right? We'll just say it causes atrophy. Did you guys know that addictions cause atrophy to various brain regions? Now, atrophy means shrinkage. One of the major areas addictions cause shrinkage is the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe, who remembers from a lot of my talks that we talk about, who remembers what does the frontal lobe do in our life? Let's see what you're typing in. So I want you to think frontal lobe is your executive processing. It is your thinking. It is how you plan, it is how you cope, it is how you control impulses. It's how you organize. It's really your daily functioning. Like right now, as I'm, when you're writing notes, you're reading, it's really a big piece of your massive functioning, executive functioning. So it causes atrophy to that area, but it also causes atrophy to other areas. And so what happens is you start to diminish your ability to do what? To cope, to plan, to organize, right? All of these things that are executive functioning. You get more poor social skills. Your thinking becomes so limited. And you don't realize it because you just think, oh, well, this is just the norm because it's so slight. It's like so little at a time that you don't realize, that you just think that's a normal way of functioning, and it's not. So that's why getting help is so important. and actually abstinence from whatever you're having addictions to is so important because of that atrophy. Good news is your brain, and because it's gray matter volume that actually atrophies, it can grow back, which is nice. They've seen when people full recovery, they get recovery in the brain. So that's good news. Depressed serotonin levels happen from addictions. And let's see. Well, let's go into my final research paper was actually on, I had to choose an addiction subject, and I chose pornography. And the reason I chose it is, yes, I've known people with it, so I've definitely seen it firsthand, but also, for some reason, it wasn't recognized yet in our diagnostic manual, our mental health diagnostic manual, which is called the DSM. And I think it's absurd that it wasn't recognized as an addiction, where when you look at on MRIs, right, you can see when someone's having an addiction, you can see which part of their brains light up and which part has atrophy. And when they compared cocaine, methamphetamines, obesity, which is a food addiction, and pornography, guess which one had the worst atrophy in more parts of the brain? It was pornography. All of them cause major issues, but pornography actually had the most atrophy in various brain regions, affected more brain regions than the other addictions. So I wanted to do my paper on that, again, just shedding light to the fact and creating mental health awareness. This is a real addiction and it needs to be in the DSM. So at this point, they categorize it because it has so many parts to it, as an impulse control disorder, a sexual dysfunction disorder, and also a non-substance addiction. Like, there's all sorts of different ways to describe it. So I have a research paper that I wrote, and I actually posted it as a blog just the other day. So you can go to my website, danielledr.com, and go on my blog, and you can see the effects of pornography if you want to dive more into just that subject. It was fascinating to learn what it does on the body, the brain, and also behavior. So some of the behavior from just this research paper I did talked about, here was the interesting thing, is people are more prone to have an addiction to pornography, and I would probably say to other addictions as well, but my paper was on pornography, when they're exposed at a young age. In one study, the mean age of exposure was 12.78, which basically means between 12 and 13 years old, they were exposed. And when kids are exposed at younger ages, it causes more risky behavior, delinquent behavior, violent attitudes towards sex and aggression towards women, dissatisfaction with an actual physical partner, anxiety, and depression. So those are some of the effects. That's just specifically with pornography, but very interesting to understand what it's going on in the brain and why it's causing those effects. Again, that frontal lobe is being shrunk, and their ability to control impulses, your frontal lobe also is your personality, the home of your personality. How many of you guys remember the story of Phineas Gage? This was back in the early 1900s, and they were building the railroad. We learned this in psychology because it's just fascinating, but he was working on the railroad and this is when we first learned where their personality was stored. He was a great, calm, very nice guy, worked on the railroad, had a rod go through, it's just kind of disgusting, but you can actually look it up, Phineas Gage, PH, his name is spelled with a PH, online. You can read his whole story, but it goes through his brain, and his entire personality changed when it went through the frontal lobe. He had no impulse control. He'd have outbursts and just angry, and he completely changed because of it. And so that's when they started studying how our frontal lobe really helps us function and to have a quality of a life, and it, obviously affects our personality. So, okay, so let's just look at addictions in general. They cause a wave of negative emotions. Recently, I asked on my Facebook page to describe what negative emotions feel like to you. I used that in my research paper. Fascinating. Fascinating to hear the descriptions, you guys. If you haven't seen that, it's in my Facebook page. You can read just what it physically and what it mentally, imaging-wise, what it does for you, or it makes you feel. Not good. Negative emotions you definitely don't want to have part of because of that, right? So the major negative emotions that addictions cause are loneliness, hopelessness, right? dissatisfaction with life in general, blaming and a victim mindset, where basically because you just can't cope, you don't take responsibility, and so everything's other people's faults. Irritability and just an overall poor coping skills. So maybe irrational or just get angry really easy, things like that. Those are your major causes from addictions. Now this is where we're going to go into the good part, the good news, right? There is healing and there's hope in healing. And that's what I want you guys to know. And I've got a couple amazing stories I'm going to share with you from two people that I personally know. And so, like I said, the brain can heal itself and you can gain back that sense of control, but you cannot do it alone. That's the catch-22 here, is that addictions are very lonely, right? They're kind of a personal hidden thing. It's not, especially with like alcohol, some people just drink even on their own, and drugs, maybe you do at a party, but it's still, you're very lonely in it. Pornography especially, right? That's in your own home. People don't even know it's happening, because if you're drunk, you have a hangover and people can kind of tell, but with pornography, it's so hidden. So it's a very lonely thing to be dealing with. And that's why what's so interesting is you're so isolated and you're so alone, but the only way to recover is to come out of that loneliness and to get support and help, group support. You have to, in fact, Patrick Carnes, who is your major psychotherapist who has worked with sexual addictions, he said the key is honesty. The only way to really recover well is being honest, and that includes first being honest with who? Yourself. I have a problem, right? I'm not even a problem, I have an addiction. And then you have to be honest with the family members and the friends that have been affected by it. And people think, oh, it just affects me. It's just my addiction. It does not just affect you. It affects all your relationships. And so that's why this cannot be dealt with alone. It has to be. And it's an embarrassment and a shame people feel. So find those people who you can trust. And if you say, oh, I can't trust anybody, I guarantee you, if you ask in your heart and meditate over one person at least, you will be led to one person that you can trust and get started with that help and learn how to trust other people. Okay, so let's go on here. So keys to a recovery are going to be your abstinence. It's not something you can just just go back to here and there and just do, okay, instead of doing it, like say it's drinking, instead of drinking a ton, I'll just drink on the weekends. It doesn't really work that way. Your brain's just going to crave it. You're going to continue that cycle in your brain. So let's see, support. Some great supports are going to be AA or Al-Anon. NA, I should say, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Churches have a lot of groups for support, and also just getting involved with the community, like a church. In fact, research has shown that those have a faith-based like community actually have better chance of recovery. AA has a very, very high recovery rate as well. Individual and family therapy. The family or whoever's affected is huge. You have to realize that it has created some other behaviors and coping and relationship issues within your family. And so doing family therapy is huge. Hypnotherapy, I know I've talked about that. I've got a research paper on that. Great way to just tap into the subconscious and let go of those addictions. Essential oils, which I'm going to go into, and vitamins that help to restore that dopamine and modulate the brain activity. So again, like you can look at my research paper on pornography. I had that written there. To learn more just specifically about that, that's on my blog. But let's go into, the first thing is going to be vitamins and minerals, that type of stuff. So interesting enough, I found, anybody like bananas? I'm not a huge banana fan, but they're great for you. But so bananas, I'm going to show you, it says the research showed that because it has phenolic constituents, they contribute to producing L-dopa and dopamine. I thought that was really cool. So eat a banana a day, right? The vitamin folate also has some good research with dopamine. And folate, it says, positively influences the brain, and not only dopamine, but also serotonin and norepinephrine from folate. So folate can be found in avocados, beets, garbanzo beans, broccoli, asparagus, spinach, and lentils. So it's just about eating healthy in general, but adding in like some of the, I love avocados. I'm a California girl, so love our avocados. Having an avocado a day would be happy for me. So finding folate. Now, when I say folate, I don't mean folic acid. Folic acid is a synthetic form of folate. You can find vitamins that have folic acid, but that's not going to be the same. I guarantee you, you need folate. So there are some supplements that contain folate because they're from a whole food base and they're not a synthetic form of vitamin. So I urge you to find those. I have a vitamin pack that has folate. It's called the Lifelong Vitality Pack. Love it. I notice a big difference when I don't take it. That's how good the vitamins are for me, because I've taken vitamins my entire life, didn't notice a difference if I skipped or not. So when I started taking these, I was like, well, one time I ran out for 2 weeks and I was like, that's fine. It was not fine. My joints, I started hurting. I just started feeling a little bit more lethargic. So they are absolutely amazing for folate, and then also other whole foods that you get. So Lifelong Vitality Pack. Mia, you're doing so fabulous at typing everything. Thank you. Okay, the next thing of, let's see. Okay, next thing is bee pollen. I thought this was very interesting. Bee pollen helps restore dopamine levels. In this research study, how many of you guys take bee pollen? I thought that was kind of cool. You can just buy it from your local health food store. So get a local bees and just do a little scoop of it a day, like a little tablespoon. I actually really enjoy the flavor too. But this was interesting. They injected the rats with propionic acid, which is a neurotoxin. What was that? It's a food additive, sadly enough. And so they found that it depleted, it caused neurotoxicity in the brain. That's what it was. And so when they injected the bee pollen, it reversed the neurotoxic effects of the propionic acid and helped with producing dopamine. So anyway, bee pollen. Okay, let's go on to psychoaromacology, which is a study of how aromatic constituents influence the brain as well. So when looking at aromatic compounds, we're looking at lemon essential oil, which is high in limonene metabolites. So limonene, what it showed in this one study was able to, with ingestion, it had a strong effect on monoamine neurotransmitters, and the monoamine neurotransmitters are dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. So again, help to regulate those in the brain. Another study on the compound of limonene, which is limonene is found on citrus essential oils that sit on the rind. So I have a lot of people ask, well, can I just juice a lemon? Sure, because that's got tons of nutrients, but that is not limonene. It's not essential oils. The essential oils are on the rind of the fruit, protecting it from its environment, protecting it from toxins in the environment. So that's why you want both, right? The rind and the fruit. Fruit has the nutrients, rind has the cleansing effects. Okay, so this is found on lemon, grapefruit, orange, tangerine, lime, all sorts of citruses. You'll find limonene. So in this study was really in particular the only one I've ever been able to find that has related with actual drugs. And this one found that when they had I think it was rats or mice, I can't remember, take the limonene, after giving them the limonene, it inhibited the effects of hyperactivity from methamphetamine. So they injected methamphetamine and then gave them limonene, and showed that it inhibited hyperactivity from the methamphetamine, and it elevated, and it reversed, this is what it says, limonene reversed the meth-induced elevated levels of dopamine. How cool is that? So simple, in the nucleus accumbens. This is like the coolest research study on that. So again, just helping the brain to modulate the excitatory activity going on. So how you would take limonene internally with essential oils, right? You're going to look at using lime, lemon, grapefruit. Oh, I didn't grab my oils by me. I'm looking for them. And put maybe a drop in your water. So if you have a glass of water, not plastic, but an actual glass, because plastic's toxic, and the limonene is going to break down that toxicity and you'll drink it. So glass, and put like 5 drops of lemon in an 8-ounce glass, 3 to 5 times a day. Get that lemon going in you. That is what's important. And so that's going to help again with just your dopamine activity, just healthy dopamine activity. Okay. The next, last couple essential oils was actually studied on the compound carvacrol. I think it sounds so funny. Carvacrol. That's how it's spelled. It's a monoterpene phenol, which that doesn't matter. But anyway, point being, it's oregano and thyme are high in carvacrol. So this found that with oral administration of the compound carvacrol, they found that it interacted positively in the brain with the dopaminergic system. So those are some great ones. Again, we cook with oregano and thyme in our foods, so using the essential oils, not putting them on high heat, but adding them to your foods. Or you could even do a little capsule, a veggie capsule with 1 drop oregano, 1 drop of thyme, and then do 3 to 4 drops of lemon in a capsule and take that once a day or twice to 3 times a day. Could be a really good benefit, again, for the brain and just aiding the body. Again, and I want to be sure, essential oils do not treat or cure or heal addictions or any other mental health disorder. What do? They just help your body restore, just like vitamins do. And that's what we're talking about. Start eating healthier, rather, choosing a salad over a Twinkie. Your brain's going to feel better. Choosing an essential oil rather than, a toxic perfume, your brain's going to feel better. So that's what we're talking about, how you can restore your brain is by just doing things already nature has given you that will help it balance itself. And then abstinence, like we talked about. Okay, so from here, I just want to share a couple of stories that I think are really fun. So one is a friend of mine. His name is David Ross. You can find him on Facebook at I Finally Quit. Okay, and he actually had, I've got his little story here, about 20 years of being a very heavy smoker. And then 25 years of being a heavy drinker. He said he drank so much he ended up homeless, which caused him to stop smoking. So that was a good first step, right? But he didn't stop drinking. And when he finally stopped drinking when he drank so much, it put him in a coma. He ended up in the hospital in a coma for 3 days, and then was in the hospital for 15 days just in recovery. He almost lost his life from drinking. And that's what caused him, to look at his life and go, okay, am I going to destroy it, or do I want to actually live it and help other people? And so he knew he had to help other people. And so that's what he does now. If you guys go to ifinallyquit.com, great for, especially, smoking and drinking. That's really his forte, is helping people quit. And one of the things I love is that he actually does use the essential oils. He uses the emotional aromatherapy, because one of the things he tells me when quitting is the biggest struggle is the roller coaster of emotions. When you're quitting, you just have, especially with smoking too, he says you have a lot of maybe irritability or short or curt and things that you're just like, just managing your emotions, because again, it's atrophied your frontal lobe. You don't have that impulse control even over your emotions, and you're coping. So he helps people use this emotional aromatherapy system, if you can see this. So if you're needing to just gain peace back, he'll have you use peace or forgive. These are just great for managing the emotions during quitting. Okay, so that's one story. I just think that was really cool. You don't need to end up in a hospital in a coma to be able to quit, but it is what really drove him to stop quitting, and now helping others really keeps him on track, keeps him sober. So another friend of mine, Dana Sokolov, she's amazing. She's here in San Diego, and her and I work really closely together. I love hearing her story. So Dana actually, her story is she was started doing drinking, drugs, and even bulimia, so even food obsession and addiction from the age of 13. Said she just had a lot of things going on in her life. Her mom was active alcoholic at the time, so that's what she turned to for coping, and also just to mask everything that was going on as a 13-year-old. And so she ended up being in alcohol addiction and drug addiction about 11 years. And what happened was she got it at 24, so this is now, 11 years later, she got a DUI, and she found herself just so alone. She was here in San Diego, and she just felt hopeless. And just, just didn't know how to go on anymore. And what was really cool is a thought just popped in her mind that said, what if you had a sobriety birthday starting tomorrow? And she looked at the calendar and it was July 11th. And it's funny because I talked to her this morning and that's actually tomorrow. So this actually happened to her, several years ago. And it said, what about that? And it just sparked like this, I can do that. And it sparked this need to be able to be sober. So she went that July 11th, which is, tomorrow for us too. So I encourage any of you who are listening to this today that ask that same question to yourself. What if you could have a sobriety birthday that could start tomorrow? And make July 11th your sobriety birth date. I think it's beautiful. So she went to an AA meeting that very, very next day, and just because I thought that was interesting, she shared that she just felt so alone in her addiction. She didn't know, she thought how she felt about wanting to control things in her life and wanting to mask things and figuring out how to cope. She felt alone in it. She walked into the AA meeting and was just overwhelmed with how not alone she was, how so many other people she could relate to and they struggled like her, and she just bonded with them. She met so many amazing friends through AA and has created a wonderful network of support. She now supports other people as well, and she got support from that moment on out and quit. Some other things she had to do, this is very common with recovering from addictions, is changing your patterns, your route that you drive to work, your friends. You must change your friends, the activities that you do. And she said she just changed her whole life around and started a new life with friends in recovery. So what's really cool is she's actually doing a sobriety birthday live feed. In fact, maybe if Dana's on here, she can say hello to everybody, and you guys can watch her sobriety birthday live feed tomorrow. She's going to share her journey in now being recovered. I think it's 5 years, if I'm correct. Sorry if I've got that birth date wrong. But I think it's about 5 years now, and she's going to share her story. And she also inspires people to use the essential oils in their recovery for, again, managing those mood, emotions, and just helping restore that healthy level of dopamine that we need in our brain, and, of course, many other things that we talked about in addiction. So, you guys, I hope you can share this with somebody who may need to learn. One part of healing is also prevention, and intervention is prevention. Oh my gosh, that didn't make any sense. A huge piece in addiction is creating prevention and awareness. And it's also a great intervention when you can learn what's going on in the brain, and when you can learn what's going on with yourself and not feel alone. That's a huge piece. And preventing, and by educating people that what happens in the brain can make a huge difference. I remember, gosh, I'm keep going on now, but I did a class on addictions over in a local community store over here, and I remember a girl was sitting on the front row, and it was when I first was teaching about it, and so I felt a little nervous, and she was like looking at me like, what? So you're saying that my brain is shrinking? And she was like so mad. And I looked at her and I went, yes. I mean, it was because of her behavior towards me too, but I just said yes. And she was like, she was so upset about it. So point being is creating that awareness, though, it's going to sink in for people at that right moment when their heart is ready, and they will choose what day is going to be their sobriety birthday and go have the courage, be brave, and walk into an AA or an NA meeting or a church group and just say, I need help, I'm ready, and I can't do it on my own anymore. And that's when you'll have change. So everybody, thank you for joining for Brain Talk Tuesday. It was so wonderful to be connected with you. Dana, thank you for commenting. Yes, 5 years clean tomorrow. So go ahead and join Dana's talk tomorrow. She's going to go live, so go ahead and follow her. And we'll see you guys next week on our Brain Talk Tuesday. Have a good week. Bye, everybody.